States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome.
Yeah, nice crowd here tonight.
Nice crowd, and thank you all for wearing masks and cooperating. It goes a long way for all of our health. So I know you guys are all here for the Trails Committee presentation, but we have some business to take care of before we do that, so we can release our town clerk. So we'll get right to it. Go ahead, Tara.
First is a resolution approving the proposal for FEMA-related work for East Mountain Road North Culvert replacement in the total amount of $5,910.
So this is something that's been reviewed by the town attorney, the highway department. This is FEMA work to be done on these two roads, East Mountain Road North and East Mountain Road South. This is for the engineering and the surveying. So if I can get a motion for accepting the FEMA-related work for East Mountain Road North culvert replacement in the total of $5,910.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Next is a resolution approving the proposals for FEMA-related work for East Mountain Road South retaining wall repair / stream widening in the total amount of $6,365.
Again, this is work to be done to prepare the roads. This was a result of Hurricane, I believe this was from Sandy, one of the storms we had. But again, this is just for the engineering and the surveying. So can I get a motion for FEMA-related work for East Mountain Road East Mountain Road South, retaining wall repair, stream widening in the total of $6,365.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And I vote aye.
Next is a resolution approving the Highway Department purchase of a 2022 Ford F-250 XLT crew cab truck in the amount of $55,377 and authorizing the supervisor to execute all documents as may be necessary to carry out the terms and conditions thereof, and this is a roll call vote.
So this was a budgeted item for our 2022 budget, and this was approved last month, but we had to do some more research on the financing options, which we did. We did the due diligence and researched it, so we are getting the best rate possible and the best purchase arrangement. So can I get a motion for the approval of the financing for a 2022 Ford F-250?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Councilwoman Farrell.
I vote aye.
Councilman Angel.
Aye.
Councilman Flaherty.
Aye. If I could get a truck at this price, I'd buy it tomorrow myself.
Councilwoman Cotter.
Aye.
And I vote aye, so it's unanimous.
And I do know there's some beautiful electric trucks starting to come out that look sweet, very sweet, very sweet.
It's definitely on our radar. Waiting for electric.
When they
no
can
question
plow
about
snow, and I'm sure they're coming, but I don't think we're there yet. But I think once they're capable of doing that, we'll certainly research it and probably be the first ones to purchase one, I would bet. So,
it. All right, so Tara, keep leading.
Tara, you're out.
Thank you.
Okay, so Philipstown Trail Committee, you're up. Let's get this show on the road here. We've got a lot of props and screens.
Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. I'm Rebecca Ramirez, the co-chair of the Philipstown Trails Committee. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, I'll speak a little bit louder. I'm Rebecca Ramirez, the co-chair of the Philipstown Trails Committee, and Laura Bosey, my co-chair, could not be here this evening. They're speaking at the village meeting this evening about tourism and parking, which are very important topics that touch us all. So Mary Ann Sullivan will be doing the presentation with me today. Do you want to just say hi? So thank you for coming. And today our purpose is to get feedback from town and town board. And we'll be sharing this presentation with you with Dan Biggs from Weston and Sampson today. So here's our agenda for today. We will share with you the process, the alternative analysis, our favored routes. We will also share next steps as well as key community takeaways from our recent community engagement that took place in the fall of last year. And then question and comments. So we are the Philipstown Trails Committee, and if you don't know who we are, we've been around for about 5 years, ever since the Community Congress took place in 2017. If anyone was there at the Community Congress, raise your hand. Okay. So those of you that don't know what the Community Congress was, it was a gathering of residents coming together to prioritize, what would help promote and conserve Philipstown. So everyone had a chance to vote, and 750 people voted. And the top 3 priorities, number 1 was walking and biking paths, number 2 was clean water, and number 3 was a teen resource center. So tonight you are seeing the number 1, what has happened with number 1, walking and biking paths. So as you can see, we are a town advisory committee, and our purpose is to advise the town of Philipstown on how to improve the ability for residents to safely get around town without recourse to motorized transit. Our guiding principles are very important to us. They help us because there's a lot of feedback, and we want to make sure we have these to ground us as we move forward. So we pasted them near the maps so that you can see them, but they are neighborhood connection and collaboration, equitable and complete streets. Complete streets means a street that is built for many users, not just vehicles. Environmental responsibility, and building upon assets. And the last thing I just want to say is if everybody who's a PTC volunteer could raise your hand so you know who they are. So we'll be around here, and if you want to speak to us. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple seats here in the front if you want to come and join us. There are seats out in front if you want to come on before it gets started. There's 2 right here, 1 sandwiched in the middle.
I have to say, this is the biggest crowd we've had since the place has been renovated.
It's not because of me. I know that. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Daniel Biggs. I'm a landscape architect with Weston Sampson. It's nice to see some similar faces from past meetings. I know we've heard a lot of comments so far, but this is the 4th of our meetings just like this to receive comments on this project. As a landscape architect, the last 10 years I've been focusing on bicycle and pedestrian trails, mostly within the Northeast, but previously across the country. And this is the type of projects that we work on to see the feasibility, see opportunity to connect communities. And it's not so much for all those that I even desire to ride it, but it's for you as the residents to use for your local connections, for your daily trips to school, to be able to walk to the post office, to make those local connections, not have to get in the car and not have to rely on an automobile, and to enjoy, to recreate, and to have a healthy lifestyle. So as I go through the presentation tonight, that'll be a theme I'm going to start telling you as to how we're framing this, what the intent is, and really the reason why we're doing this study, to see is it feasible and what are the steps forward for the town to make this into a realistic trail. I'm with Weston Sampson. We're a mid-sized multidisciplinary engineering and planning firm. I'm based in the Albany office, and I run our New York region. And this is the project that we work on, and we're proud to be here and help the town move forward with this project. A couple of things just to make sure we're in the feasibility stage, and many need to be reminded as to what this means in terms of the process of design and construction. But really, the first part of our project is to see, is it feasible of creating a trail facility of some sort or a pathway of some sort to connect Cold Spring to the general Garrison area. So in our process, we're looking at gathering information, analyzing it, and then looking and see how that would relate to the ground, as to what's on the site to relate to, can a trail physically go there? Is it going to connect our destinations we're desiring to have with its community assets and connections? And then what are the steps forward? And as you see the graph on the bottom, we're in feasibility, we are here, and it's many years even for the first phase of the project to move forward through planning, design, construction, and opening, desired in 5+ years. So it takes a long process because there's many aspects, just as getting feedback in this realm, as well as in future steps to move forward to having a physical project in the ground for all of us to enjoy. So the project area in general we're talking about is in the general vicinity of Cold Spring down to the Garrison. And I'll go into a little more detail as to what is within this general north-south parallel to the river area. But really the goal is to link the important public and community spaces and resources within this area for residents' use. Neighborhoods, schools, libraries, post office, grocery store, farmers market, train stations, and other connections within the community. So those are really the foundation as to where we're building these connections for the community to use. When people think of a trail or a pathway, we all have our different ideas as to what does that look like. The students here in the front, they may think of a trail, it's going to ride their mountain bikes into a single track. Or is it on an asphalt pathway or gravel? But we really want to go back and think about what is the purpose, what is the need for a facility of this, and how do you prepare a facility to create that facility that's useful for everyone? So we look at many different factors, from the function, the accessibility, the services, the widths, the context, and different users. And each one of these has a different need that we're balancing to create a facility for users of all needs, interests, and types. When we look at facility types, there's two major users that we really are focusing on. The first is the pedestrians, which all of us are a part of, simple walking, but not only as able pedestrians right now, but possibly with a cane, with a walker, with other mobility devices as needed. The other side is bicyclists. Many wheeled vehicle or wheeled users have different needs, and if you think of a small, narrow cycle to a wide, narrow cycle, there are different needs of different types of service types. So moving from the left side to the right side of this picture, we're going from a more road-like condition as a bike lane or as a shared lane marking here for more of a narrowed style user, pedestrians and bicyclists here in the middle on a shared use path. This is a surface that can accommodate the most amount of users, different user types, pedestrians, runners, all the way down to different commuters possibly. And as we move further along the spectrum to a single track trail, this is more specialized users, hikers, mountain bikers, very unique users, but cannot necessarily accommodate every user that would be on an on-road cyclist use. So as you think about a different type of facility type for pathways and trails, we're thinking of how does this work within the greater community. No, thank you. So as we're thinking of different facility types, we're thinking about how does this relate to the ground? What are the conditions within our project area to be considered? So we're looking at property ownerships, topography, from the field and also from our mapping that's available from different resources. You see the yellow and green dots here. We're thinking about where the community resources connect to. How does it influence the need to have connection to the north-south vicinity as such? So as we are in this process, we're taking mapping, but also walking the field. I was able to take the committee on a couple walks, open their eyes to see how steep is, what does a steep incline like such look, a rock outcropping. It's really hard to get a pathway through a facility like that. So really exploring what does this look like and how can we create that pathway within the greater context of the community. In addition, we're also looking at what does 90 traffic look like. everyone had to drive here at some point around 9 to know that traffic there is not always the most accommodating for cyclists and pedestrians. So we looked back at some of the DOT speed volumes and incident rates, and you can see from the graph, there's about 32.5 crashes per year on 9D from documented data by DOT. 71% of those incidents are caused by driver error, which is of not really much surprise. And 71% of them occur during 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Not much surprise either. So that the traffic over the years is high speeds, as well as there have been incidents on 9D to be of concern as we move forward. So with all this data, we then take all this information, digest it, and you'll see, run through a couple alternatives here in a minute or two. But first, we've been going through the public, through many of these meetings, talking with residents, a couple of meetings. Do you want me to quickly do a quick summary? Would you like to?
I could do it.
Okay.
I'll go fast.
Sure.
So this has been 2 years of us working on this study, and prior to that, an additional 3 years of getting together and organizing and applying for funding. But we've done one-on-one stakeholder meetings, including Audubon Society, Constitution Marsh, Hastings Center, Manitou School, New York State Department of Transportation, New York State Parks, Open Space Institute, Scenic Hudson, St. Basil Academy, and the town of Philipstown Park staff, in addition to Boscobel, sorry. And our public meetings happened mostly recently in this fall. We had smaller meetings because we were looking favorably upon the routes that go in and out of 9D, and we wanted to speak with the neighbors that are closer to in proximity to those areas. And then we had a public meeting at the Desmond Fish Library, and which some of you I can see were there. And then we're having this meeting today. So this is also an important meeting because we want to make sure that what we hear today is confirming what we've heard and adding to it. So if you haven't shared your thoughts with us, we'd really appreciate it if you did tonight. And we did a parent pedestrian survey, which John will go into, but we had 324 participants. And our future meetings, Village of Cold Spring Workshop will be coming up in the next month or two. And we are planning a wider survey because we know that, it's not just about parents and families. There are people that are aging in place here. 20% of our population is aging in place. Great. I think we're ready for the next one. John, do you want to come up and share a little bit about the pedestrian safety survey?
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm John Pavlik, a member of the committee and a resident of Cold Spring. And so as part of our community outreach, we did...
There you go.
Okay, thanks, sorry. As part of our community outreach, we did a survey online of parents with students in area schools and preschools, and we did this in the fall. And we worked with the principals of the schools, and they sent the email out to the parents of their lists that they had. And we got 324, I think, might have been 326 total, but a couple didn't answer us for all the questions. But 324 completed surveys that we did in the fall on their views on pedestrian safety along 9D, pedestrian and bicycling safety. So just quick summary, a couple of main points. The first one, if your children could walk or bike safely to school using 9D, would you do so? So we asked that, and the vast majority indicated that they would be inclined to do that. Either they said yes, 69.5%, and another 16.5% said maybe. So the vast majority, about 85%, would if they felt it could be done safely. So then we asked second, do your children walk along or 9D in order to get to school? The vast majority there said no. So 69% said no. So most aren't walking there. They don't feel that it's safe. And then finally, do your children bike along 9D in order to get to school? And again, the same, even higher percentage, 88.7, almost 89%, almost 9 out of 10 said that they don't bike along 9D because of the safety concerns. So I think the big takeaway there is people are interested, but they don't feel it's safe.
Thank you.
What's the next slide? All right. Okay, so we also asked, please select the school or daycare your children attend. And so there we had the largest number, Haldane, 54%, second largest, Manitou, 22%, and then Garrison, 18%, and then a small number from the Foundry Montessori and the Nest and a few others. And then finally, the committee asked, we're exploring improving pedestrian safety in Philipstown. Would this be of interest to you? Over 90%, more than 9 out of 10 said yes, that would be of interest to them. Thank you.
Thank you. As somebody that bikes that 90 often, it's currently not safe, I can tell you. Not a safe ride.
So this is, we just were documenting a little bit how the street is utilized, how it's being used. And so we just have a couple photos here. We have 20% of our residents we have 20% of our households are families. And so we've been seeing, children on bikes, and it's great that they're on their bikes, but sometimes they're on their sidewalks. And so just noting that. But Manitou did request a safer crossing for their parents. So we just went to a visit with Manitou and documented some of that. Move over here. Okay, overview of the corridor.
So as I mentioned, we're looking at the overall corridor from Cold Spring to Garrison, and we broke it up into 4 different areas, which I'm going to run through here with Mary Ann. But basically the goal is looking to connect from north to south, running through each of those. So the first area at the north, Cold Spring, you can see we looked at many different alternatives, and for each of these we're going to highlight one favorite route. Starting at Cold Spring Station, moving south towards the 90 corridor, we looked at what would connections be to make a pathway connect. After some discussions with the committee, they decided that the edge of Cold Spring would be the logical terminus for a pathway of the favored route heading south from 190. Looking at the overall Cold Spring neighborhood area, we acknowledge that a lot of people can connect or can circulate in those neighborhood streets or local streets to make that connection, to make the 90 corridor being the favored route to get to the southern connections within the community.
Excuse me, that big yellow dot, where is that?
Right at the bridge at the Cold...
That's what I thought, but by
Yep.
Downey Oil, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So for each of these, we're going to run through a number of pros and cons for the alternatives that we considered for the route. Do you want to tag team this? Okay. Although I'm kind of looking this way.
Yeah, it's hard to see. Here, okay. So for Route A1, we thought that, this is obviously a very nice route down at the Foundry Preserve. It's really beautiful. It connects to the train station. So those are obvious pros for starting there. Some of the cons, though, have to do with it's not currently a multi-use path, or some areas of it are not a multi-use path, and that is a goal of ours. So bicyclists would have to dismount or walk their bikes on some areas. We'd have to connect with Scenic Hudson and see if they might be willing to work with us on that. For Route A2, which is our favored route, it definitely provides connectivity to Cold Spring and Nelsonville amenities, and just recall that connecting to community resources is a key goal of the plan, so it definitely meets that. And then the flatter terrain promotes accessibility for all different types of users, which is another key goal of ours. However, because of where it's starting, it would not facilitate improvements in Cold Spring, complete streets types improvement in Cold Spring.
That route kind of avoids the heart of the village.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes, yes. Oh, yeah, Dan, can you point to where it starts?
I'm sorry. General
So,
in here.
so A2.
Right basically at the bridge on the Cold Spring side, more or less.
Where would people park? Or
So-
what's your
Well,
vision for everybody starting at that yellow spot?
we're hoping that they start by walking, because it's really meant to be for residents moving, walking to school, walking to the farmer's market. So we're not envisioning.
You don't think tourists are going to come and, no? Oh, okay.
Well,
Just checking.
Well, it's definitely, the plan is to build it around the needs of the residents and residents moving from where they live to a community resource. That's sort of the overarching.
I think we can hold the comments more for the conversation at the end, but the general idea is that this really would not be having one connection point. The neighborhood, the community here would basically ride or walk to get to one common point of where the pathway would run mostly along 9D. So there would not be one parking lot, one general vicinity that would be the congregation point, and then motorists would then get out of their cars and walk as such. The intent of what we're looking at. But as we're talking about each of these areas, the key that we want to get to tonight is that there's 4 areas which could be many different phases of our project. The key is coming up with what is the area or the project that makes the most sense to make those community connections to get from your resources from neighborhoods to the post office, to the grocery store. So is used by people in this room is intent. It's not that tourist route that we may hear from other trails in the area. That's not the priority to why we're trying to create this pathway network within the town.
Take us through the whole.
Sure. So
we can understand.
Why don't we get through the presentation and then we'll open up to questions? How does that?
So the next area B.
Do that now while we're showing us A2.
Will you be able to answer questions at the end? I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to run through each of the corridors. You'll see that area B, which starts at the terminus of area A, primary favored route is along 9D as such. Continuing down, as you'll note here, there are possible alternatives on either side of the 9D. Due to the context of 9D, knowing that we don't have right-of-way information that's defined yet, and we've gotten all the mapping available from DOT, but that is a critical component to know what is the width, what the lands are within the 9D corridor, know if it's on either side. You see we've noted 2 possible crossings of 9D, knowing one by the Manto School, one in just general vicinity of Boscobel, that if there is a crossing, we want it to be safe. So we want to make sure that motorists will be slowed down or stopped potentially to give pathway users a chance to cross. Or if there's users that are in the one side of the street, that they have that connection point to get to the other side of the pathway. So the favorite route continues along 9D, past Boscobel or possibly within the Boscobel lands. They are welcoming to having more users within their space. Continuing down along to the existing bridge of Indian Brook. Right. Okay.
Right through Indian Brook Road.
Correct. So Indian Brook Road, that would not be a pathway, sir. Comments at the end. That would not be a pathway, but that would be using a shared street. So in that case, it would be a shared use path along Boscobel and terminate onto the street, and then using a slow street down to the current bridge that's under the 9D underpass. So area B, we did mention the 9D corridor. We did look at other connections within this area, primarily along the existing wetlands area before here. After further investigation, knowing of different resources that are here from environmental resources, land ownerships, this was not the preferred route, but we did look at that as a possibility. And also noting that although it's desirable from a viewshed standpoint or from a scenic recreation standpoint, it really is not providing additional connections to resources within the community. Other connections or other possible alignments see parallel to 9D. Here there is in B3, there is land ownerships by Boswell. This could be a possibility as a off 9D corridor alignment if the connections could happen across 9D. Area C, this is just south, so mostly in the St. Basil Academy. You'll note here that there is not a preferred or favored route for the reason that we have not had the response from St. Basil at this point that they are allowing a pathway connection through their lands. You can see that we are looking at possibly the former Route 9 corridor within St. Basil lands. or possibly along the 9D corridor in front of St. Basil's. And then we have basically looked at along the wetland area, which is due to severe grades, really would not be feasible from this standpoint. So it's either a C3 or a C1 within this area of the project. As I mentioned, there's many resources within this area. So the C2, steep slopes, wetlands, also property ownerships. And then basically along C1 and C3, right-of-way will become a consideration for this area of the project. Moving further south, below Town Park, you can see here the favorite route is primarily along the 9D corridor, connecting down to a new possible crossing and the existing crossing by the school, and eventually down to Desmond Fish Library and the Philipstown Rec Center. In this alignment, we did look at D1, which is primarily on private lands. It did not seem feasible. Really, again, a scenic route was not really connecting to resources within the community. And the other connections here around the upper and lower Station Road, really these connections were not preferred because the 9D corridor really would give you that connection down to different resources within the community itself. Again, mentioning the connections with the community, this route is shown here primarily on the western side of the route, but would connect over across 9D to get on the library side of the road, knowing of the lands possibly available. But again, confirmation of a right-of-way really is critical within the next stages of the project. So as we move forward, we had some key takeaways within the community process for feedback, which we want to highlight some of the positive reactions, also the concerns we heard from community so far.
So we thought it would be good to kind of summarize the takeaways from the community process we've done so far. And just to, we mentioned this earlier, but we did the online surveys. We've done neighbors meetings. We did community-wide meetings with extensive Q&A and discussion periods. We've also gotten feedback through short pen and paper surveys that we distributed at community meetings. We've received written comments via email and letters. And we've had one-on-one meetings with institutional stakeholders, a total of 14 of those. We have some upcoming meetings as well in an attempt to, really hear from a wide range of community stakeholders. When we submit our final report on the feasibility study, we'll have done an in-depth analysis of all of the feedback. But for tonight, just to summarize some of the key things that we've heard, we've definitely heard that there's broad support for a path, some type of path that links neighborhoods and community resources. So gets people out of their cars and walking and biking to spaces in the community that they use every day. People see a variety of uses for what we've proposed. Some people said they could see using the entire path as a recreational path or for exercise, while others say that they would only see themselves using shorter segments of the path. We also heard really clearly from community feedback, that any path that is built needs to be accessible for all types of users, all ages, abilities, and different types of use, biking, running, etc. And again, we've mentioned safety several times, but safety keeps coming up again and again as a big concern and a big priority for the community. Any path that is created should improve current conditions. Many residents view what's going on right now as unsafe. People are using 9D to bike and to walk, and it is an unsafe situation. In terms of the concerns that we heard, certainly property owners along the proposed route had unique or particular concerns, and some of these were that a path could potentially impact their personal property. They're also concerned about safety for themselves and also for path users, particularly in any proposed sections that are along 9D that cross people's driveways, that getting in and out of driveways could be a concern. There were also other concerns about who would use the trail and possible overuse, including would a path attract more non-residents to the area. Would a path be consistent with protecting the sensitive ecology, say down at Indian Brook or other areas that people are concerned about? And also, would enough people use the path to warrant the effort to create it? So those are some of the concerns and things that we think need further consideration. And then finally, this is not the focus of tonight's conversation, but we wanted to just report back to you very briefly, and we'll go into more detail in our final report. But we heard so many issues about safety and transportation concerns in the community, and the general sense that there's no overarching plan for the town in terms of how to handle transportation issues. And so we kind of put all of those under the umbrella of the town needs a more proactive plan for complete streets and managing transportation issues, making the town accessible to people who are not drivers, and also providing other types of transportation options. Okay, so just to wrap up and to reiterate the purpose of why we're here tonight, we'd love to answer any questions that the town board might have or the public might have about proposed routes or the process. We also want to listen to feedback from people who have come, and we're recording that feedback so that we can also integrate it into the feasibility study. And then we'd like to hear what both the town board and the public think about the preferred routes that we have laid out. And also if there are any thoughts about areas that should be prioritized, either A, B, C, or D. We obviously know that what we're laying out is a very large project and it would have to be broken down into chunks, which is why we've presented it in the way that we have as these discrete areas. And then just to remind people of where we are in the process, we're really at the very beginning of what is a long and complex process. So we're just in the feasibility stage and just at the point of listening and hearing feedback and taking all of that into consideration. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you've all put in, Laura and Rebecca. I know you've done a tremendous. And the entire Trails Committee, it was formed, I think it was five years you've been at it. So it's a great undertaking. And the inclusiveness that you've just, survey after survey, meeting after meeting, it's great. So to me, I mean, the process, and I think what we're trying to address is serving the local population, not making it a tourist attraction, not bringing more people. This is so your child can get on his bike and go from Haldane to the rec center on a safe route. And I think that's what we're looking for. To me, it seems like the more scenic route along the water obviously is going to draw tourism in my eyes. And this is just me thinking as, as a resident, as a biker, a hiker, but I mean, it would be beautiful, but I think we have something going on in the other direction to take care of that, but which is not connected to this by any means.
Right,
so,
two separate things.
The way I look at it is the two hubs are basically the Cold Spring train station and the Philipstown Rec Center. Right? Is that?
Yeah, we start off with saying that the train stations were our common hub, but as we actually looked into it further, it's not so much the train stations as a destination, it's the neighborhoods.
But you can access it from that neighborhood. I'm just trying to make it simple for me. That's the two ends, basically, the village of Cold Spring and the rec center. And a lot of the concerns we have at the rec center, and we've attempted teen centers, and it's not easy for kids to get from Cold Spring to the rec center. So that's always been a concern locally, getting your kids to be, you got to drive them. So, I mean, this would certainly assist with that. The inland streets seems like, to me, it would be more of a resident-friendly route rather than the scenic route along the Hudson, which again, I think will just draw more tourism and concerns with parking and so on. But I think if we utilize the roads that we currently have, I mean, I would love a safe bike route on 9D. That would certainly be, it's so narrow now, but it would be wonderful to be able to make a safe trip from Cold Spring to the rec center without being swiped at by cars. But I will open it to the board for
I
any.
agree
John, I'd like
with
to-
Supervisor Van Tassel that it would be great to have a safe bike lane. I've been to other towns and communities where they have more space for a bike. And when my daughter was at the rec center, I had hoped that she'd be able to take a bike. There's no way on 9D that you could take a bike down there. I even attempted to walk it. I am a great walker, and after the Castle to River run this year, I attempted to walk back home and had to have a ride pick me up. It is impossible. There is no way. And I think for people that live here, that should be possible. I really do. I just have a question whether or not on 9D at the edge of Cold Spring, we have senior housing, Chestnut Ridge. Were they engaged in a discussion of this? Because they have raised safety issues as well on 9D.
Sorry, I should get this on. So we've begun the conversation. We did drop off our flyers so that Priscilla Goldfarb handed out to residents so that they would know about our meetings. But there hasn't been, which is why there hasn't been enough. It's never enough. It's never enough feedback. And that's why we're planning for the next ask of funding. A portion of that would go towards helping us launch a community-wide survey that would include, we're thinking of an every door direct mailer, where the cost is lower for the postage and every household gets the survey. So we have, that's where my response.
Thank you.
I have a few questions that I want to address. As John mentioned, yes, it would be great to get down to the rec center. My kids go to there 3-4 times a week, 5 days a week sometimes. My concern is more so the residents that you guys think that the trails are going to go through, the people that live on Indian Brook, the homes within where your yellow dot is. Those people already use the footpath to get to Food Town, the post office, the bank. So I'm curious on what else you want to bring. There's already footpaths that take us to our community. So if you're just driven by the bike path from, as John mentioned, the train station to the rec center, yes, I understand that's wonderful. But you're going along a very busy road that people commute on from Fishkill, Wappingers, Poughkeepsie. It's hard for me to see this vision, especially when there's homeowners that live on Indian Brook, and now you're like, oh, you're going to put a path by somebody's home. It's really hard for me to get on board with what your vision is.
So I'll go back to one of the slides that had the dots, yellow dots, and I think that identifies a number of the resources that are within the corridor that are in between the rec center and the train stations. Boscobel comes to mind, but as you can see, there's several dots in here of other resources, the town park. So being able to ride or walk to go out to town park and back from Garrison. Being able to actually start in your house and get on a pathway and go down to the school and back. So it's those local rides and walks is really the critical piece to this. It's not so much the long, because this is going to take many years for this to ever to happen, but it's more about the local connections to get to the post office or the grocery store. Although you may have that connection up here in the village core or some pieces down here, it's the other connections for those residents that are coming down to 9D now that they cross and can take a pathway down to school or down to the library. It's those smaller connections that really is going to make the benefit, and the long length of this really is the ultimate vision. It's going to take a long time for that to be implemented.
I actually have one other thing. Your presentation was wonderful, but I did not see anything in there for any handicap accessible for any of the people supported within our community.
So of any pathway, it's proposed to be accessible. For a pathway that's within a right-of-way of the road, per our guidance for state and federal mandates, we have to make them accessible.
ADA.
So
They'll all be handicap
they would be a
accessible.
handicap.
Okay.
The key to that is that a pathway within the right-of-way can be no steeper than the current slope or the undulations of the road. So that's key in mind. So if you have a steep grade on a road, the pathway is going to mirror it. If it's shallow of a road, very gradual, it's going to mirror it. If you're off into the other lands not within right-of-way, it's a different situation. So if you look at the road, if that's where the cars are going, that's more or less the grade that the pathway would be as well for users, walkers, bikers, accessible use.
Okay.
Bobby, Jason?
Just curious, what's the mileage from, say, Downingwale down to the rec center? How many miles is that?
I want to...
6.
It's like 5.2 something.
5 miles, roughly.
5, 6, yeah, around that.
Well, along those 5 miles, and we have a lot of, like Boscobel, we have the Garrison Institute. We got a lot of properties that I think aren't really private, that can be accessible, and I'm sure you went to the due diligence on that. So, again, I want to make people understand it's based for local people. We're not trying to build this for tourists to come here. I don't think, obviously on a weekend, you're going to have more people using it because there's going to be some tourists that may want to use this, but it's based for local community access.
I guess I'll just follow up on that point that, every member who is a member of the Philipstown Trails Committee is someone who lives here. And so as someone who lives here, we all know that there's concerns about the number of people that are up here, right? So it's not done, outside of that vein. And I think it is important, this idea that when the effort started, the beginning of the trail and the end of the trail were the train stations. But as it moved forward, it became clear that if you're really trying to make it accessible for local use as much as possible, that starting from, the village of Cold Spring at the bridge, which has its own barriers, and the Philipstown Recreation Department is about local use, and so that's something important. I think the point you made, John, about it's not the scenic route necessarily, it's the route that you would use if you're trying to get in between places in your community. So I think that's a really important point. And I guess the second point I would make is that, I think many of us who've been here a long time, we know that any good idea is not a new idea. And that there have been people who have been talking about how to try to build this sort of connection for a really long time. And I would say that, what may be new about this effort is just as you can see from the volunteers, the exhaustive amount of work that's been put in to look at all of the alternatives. I mean, to look at 9D, to try to identify what the right-of-way is that 9D controls, how to establish that. If some of those 9D corridors are very difficult, are there other ways to work around them by working, looking at institutional partners like Boscobel, like St. Basil's? Are there ways around those tough areas that make sense? But this is so early in the process, and when you talk about starting by a bridge, there needs to be more work to be done that would say, to determine some of those right-of-ways. But I would say that there's been some promising things, like the Trails Committee had a meeting with the Department of Transportation, and they said this has been a priority for us for a long time, some sort of a safe walking and biking trail. If you can build it in the Department of Transportation 9D right-of-way, we would permit it. That's a long way off, but it's in the sense of trying to determine what that right-of-way is and how to build it. So it's the beginning of a process, which seems amazing because it's been 5 years. But really, it's about kind of getting all the information needed to see if this is realistic or possible.
I just have one more question. So are these trails going to be funded by grants
So,
or the generosity of the community?
hold on, I just wanted to really quick respond to something that Jason said that was very important. You said we've been doing this work for 5 years, but people actually started some of this work prior to even the committee existing. And that's the 9D Corridor Management Plan. That was a study that was done in early 2000s. So there's been decades of the demand being shown in studies. And I brought for you all a binder of some of them, but also of the feedback, so that even though we're not giving you a final report until later, you can start to see what the town is saying. In regards to funding, these projects typically get funded through county, state, and federal dollars, and they all happen through grants. So each phase would have to be planned for an application, and that application would only happen with the town saying, we want you to continue this work.
When the grants run out, is it just mainly maintained on grants? Like, how are you going to maintain this? So if you get a grant and this trail goes through, you need another grant to maintain it? Is that like?
So
grant,
the first
grant
grant,
after grant after
you
grant.
need a
Okay.
first grant to go through your design phase, and then you need another grant for construction.
Right.
But then there needs to be a plan for,
And how you're going to
exactly,
maintain
like,
this with
and
the
keep
funding, right.
keep it stable
Right.
and sustainable, yes.
Okay. So you don't have that answer, how you're going to sustain the trails?
Well, here's the thing that's very unique about this project is that, and there are other projects like this, you know, the Green Line in Kingston is an example. There are places that require less management, but we don't want to build something that doesn't have the funding of management involved, especially being where we are. We've heard from the community, you know, too much too fast. Like, development is scary for people. And so how do you sort of take bite-sized pieces and be able to say, you know, like if the town recommended to us, well, let's just bite off this much and see. That way you can manage your expectations as well as, you know, what the project becomes. So do you understand what I'm saying?
Would you have money to sustain the trails? That's just the question.
Well, we don't have that money right now.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's not, we're not at that point yet that he,
I'd like to just, I just wanted to add that I appreciated the little crossings that you already pointed out on some of the maps. Some people are already using 90, like, for example, at the Manitou School. I've noticed people trying to cross the road there. So there are natural crossings that it doesn't have to be one big trail all at once, as you said earlier. We can take those natural areas where people are trying to get across anyway and try to make it easier for them and keep them safe. Let's keep our community safe.
All right, if that's it from the board, we can certainly open it up to questions from the community. Seal, how are we going to do this as far as the microphone goes? We have, what about,
one of them, can we move the microphone to the center?
or take one of
My
our,
mic? Here. Here, just,
he's got Jason's mic. I can't hear you now. All right, so if you have a question and you'd like to ask, we'll make them quick and come on up to the microphone, otherwise you're not going to be heard.
just state your name and where you live, please. You can pick that up if you like.
Here we are. Hi, I'm Kristen Solello. I live on Main Street, 190 Main Street. I literally live at the intersection of 301 and 9D. And I guess my question actually relates to what we were just talking about, which was the crossings. Because I have an 11-year-old kid who I'm terrified to let walk across 9D and 301 with the crosswalk. I walk my dog every day through the village, and people routinely do not stop at the crosswalks in Nelsonville, at the crosswalks by the school, by the tennis courts, etc. So I wanted to know about the crossings, if you're thinking, are we adding more stoplights? Are we adding more pedestrian walkways? Because it's terrifying to walk in this town, and I just, like, every day I get worried about what's going to happen. The speed limit, yeah, so I was just wondering about what that was going to look like on 9D and with the proposed crossings by Manitou, by Boscobel, potentially at Philipstown Park, et cetera.
Good question. So each of the crossings, as a feasibility study, we're still looking at what are those crossings, where are they to be located, and in our conversations with DOT, we are having conversations, what are possibilities? So there's warrant analyses that are required by DOT as to what can and can't go in certain locations. So the extreme side would be a traffic signal. A lot of times you need to show the demand for the connecting of the driveway or the road connecting into the DOT right-of-way, or is it simply just only pedestrians and cyclists having cross? And there's the accommodations of balance in between. The crosswalk would be on the lowest end of the spectrum in terms of accommodations for bicyclists and pedestrians crossing a roadway. So in that conversation with DOT, which we had meeting scheduled for next month, we're going to be talking about the process to go through, and they're going to have a whole analysis required of us in the planning process to decide what is a proper accommodation to make those crossings safe. From a speed standpoint, a traffic volume standpoint, or a potential user standpoint for pedestrians that would have a crossing at that location. So
And you've brought up a great point. I mean, you couldn't have any more devices than you do at 90 and 301. So there's no way to make people smarter. I hate to say that, but it's true. And you have a red light, you have crossing signals, you have boxed out, and we go through this. We have a crossing guard. The town of Philipstown has a crossing guard at the Garrison School, and she's nearly been hit on several occasions. So and there's a red light there, and there's a crosswalk. So that wouldn't address. I mean, you can't fix everything, but there's certainly improvements that can be made to make the crossings safer than what they are. So, and putting in a red light, I can tell you, Nancy, you went through this process with us, with the town of Philipstown, to get a light at 9 and Fishkill Road, which is a high-speed intersection where there was crash after crash after crash. How many years, Nam? 6 years to get that at least. So to add a red light is a lot of process. So.
Dan, is it fair to say, just for clarification, that the preferred routes that you mentioned would try to avoid the need for crosswalks by staying on one side of the 9D right-of-way? And then secondly, just to make clear that I think the goal of the Trails Committee, as I've understood it, would be to create a multiple-purpose lane in the 9D right-of-way that was physically separated from 9D by some portion of property. So I think that's an important clarification.
yeah, there's kind of 2 points. So one, we're trying to make connections with the community. So safe crossings are critical for residents to get to one side of the road to get to the pathway. That's the first thing. Yes, the goal is to stay as much on one side for continuity, for safety, within the right of way as much as possible. And the facility we're talking about is a pathway that's separate from where the cars drive today, but within state lands, as you can say. So a separate facility for cyclists and pedestrians to be safe, and then crossings at critical points to have those safe crossings to neighborhoods, and where necessary because of land restrictions or other needs within the corridor.
I have the existing, or the old 9D roadbed that goes through St. Basil's, is that state property or is that St. Basil?
I believe from the mapping we've seen so far, it's on St. Basil's
It is.
property. It was deeded over at one point. We're waiting to get all the mapping available.
And there's even a bridge.
There is a bridge,
That's
yes.
still-
And the conversation with St. Basil's, were in the conversations as to what they would allow and protecting the residents and their community there and respecting their lands. We're in that conversation right
Gotcha.
now.
Thank you.
Sorry, just for the record, it's St. Basil Academy.
Yes, sorry.
Oh, because we learned.
Don't want to slight you, but come on up.
For when you guys said that the polls for the favored routes, did you guys interview the people that live around there, or just the general public?
Great question.
Thank you.
So the question is, did we poll users or residents, people that live in the corridor, to what would be the favored route? What we did was, in the last 3 meetings, very similar to this, we have shown what a fair route is from accommodations for a user standpoint, and we asked for feedback in those meetings, just like you're giving feedback tonight. So one key point to that is that as this is a study, as a starting point, a survey that we're trying to get out into next phase would be saying, what is your thoughts, what are your opinions about using 9D that may go near your house or within the road in front of your house? Is that the proper place to put a pathway? Is it the best place? And we certainly want opinions like you to come forward because you're a user just like the rest of us. No other thoughts?
So on that note, I'm going to pass, just while the conversation continues, I am going to pass out a form, and if you'd like to write anything on it or add your address, we'll make sure that we are communicating with you.
I was puzzled by your sort of writing off the train station parking lots, because while you're thinking of a lot of utilitarian use, like open your door, walk to school, the people of Cold Spring and Garrison would use this trail recreationally. And I see parking at something like the Garrison train station, taking, I think it's called Marcia's Mile. I'm not sure, but it's the trail that goes all the way to the train station to Philipstown Rec. So people who don't want to walk all the way from their houses could drive their children part of the way, park at the train station, and then hit the trail and be on the trail for a reasonably long amount of time. Likewise, from the Cold Spring station, of course, you can walk through the Foundry property. So I didn't see why there's not a little interplay of trails that are on those places that are near the river, going back up to 9D rather than trying to run the whole thing along 9D. Or even parallel trails, one on the trails that exist now. And remember, Marcia's Mile is pretty, what do you call it, level, too.
And it's existing.
Yeah,
Right, it's
and
already.
And it exists,
brings it right to
as
the rec
in
center.
Verugi Road already exists, and it's very level, and it's very easy to walk. We do have sections that are theoretically at least in play here already. The other thing I wanted to ask about is crossing the Foundry Brook. You know, I don't see that the crossing would necessarily have to be done over the car bridge. If you walk the School Hill Road Trail, has anyone been there? There are two wonderful wooden bridges that were built by the West Point engineering class. And they span shallow creeks. It seems to me if you're on the east side of the road there, it's not that steep an incline down to the creek. You could put in a pedestrian bike bridge there and then bring it up gradually on the other side and avoid that whole, this is truly the most terrifying place for a walker, crossing the bridge.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I just want to take a minute. I don't really have a comment, but I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Victoria Caffarelli. I'm Chief of Staff to Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg. It's nice to email with you, Supervisor Van Tassel. So thank you, Rebecca, for inviting us to this meeting. Dana was in Albany today, so she couldn't come, but it's very interesting hearing all about this. So we're paying attention and eager to hear what the community has to say. I am not a community member, so I'm not going to offer my comments. But we are going to be back in Philipstown for a town hall meeting on Saturday, February 11th at the Desmond Fish Public Library at 10 a.m. We'll be circulating that around. Also, next Thursday, January 26th at 7:30, we're going to be doing a virtual town hall meeting on Zoom. So we're here to help in any way we can with any issues from trails to whatever goes on in state government that impacts all of you as Dana's constituents. So just want to take a minute to introduce myself.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, thanks.
And we'll be in touch where we'll set up some stuff. Thank you. Thank you, son. And thank you to Dana.
My name is Heather Hamilton. I'm on Indian Brook Road, actually right on Indian Brook Road. We love it up here. We've been here over 4 years. I love that she's passing around the form to fill out because we have not been surveyed or asked about this at all. We heard through a neighbor. We have attended some of the meetings.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
We have attended some of the meetings back in the day when we were having the disastrous COVID and the
The parking.
overflux of people. And I understand that you are trying to make a beautiful, safe pathway on 9D, but I do not understand how taking a pathway onto Indian Brook Road is not satisfying public more than the people who live here, like the private people. And I mean, speaking of someone who lives on this road and has people that don't live up here putting their face to our window and looking in our house, it's frustrating. So I totally understand the need for a safe place for our kids and people to walk the road. But when it starts to veer off on that path and go onto people's roads that where they live and homes, and I understand there are homes on 9D also, but it seems like it's, with social media, it's going to become a frenzy.
Well, that's what we need to avoid, making it a tourist attraction.
Love to be part of that and like also like
Sounds good.
discussion.
Thank you for coming and your comment. Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Mike Lorne. I live in Cold Spring. Question for you. Is this thought of as a four-season path, or is this something that is going to be open seasonally? And if it is thought of as a four-season path, have you thought about how this would be maintained through the winter?
Yeah, so one, I don't think we had the discussions directly to say is the four-season path, as your question is. But with most pathways within right-of-way, as they're treated as a transportation facility, they're treated equally as a road. So yes, it would be maintained, and a recommendation would be that it be maintained. It comes down to maintenance funds and what's available to maintain the pathway from a plowing standpoint. But as a facility that's be used by the residents, as local connections, just as well as if you're going to drive to the grocery store that you can walk and ride your bike, that should be maintained and operated through the 4 seasons. In the winter, that would be a plowing, which we should have snow at some point, and possibly sanded as such. But again, and it comes to also other seasons. In the fall, blowing the leaves, removing the leaves as necessary, or in the spring, simply picking up any debris from the winter months. So being treated as a transportation facility for connections for users or residents is the proper way that a pathway like this should function. On the counter, if it was a recreation trail, you'll hear most municipalities say it's recreation, so we don't treat it in the winter. We encourage the cross-country skiing and other users to not have it maintained because it's for recreation use. It's at your leisure and your pleasure. But being a functional facility, it should be maintained, and that would be a recommendation moving forward as a facility for residents of the town.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
I did want to really quickly respond because we did think about this. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, Heather. So I actually think I have your returned letter with me today. We sent out letters and we got about 6 back. We used e-parcel from the county, and some of them that came back were P.O. boxes, but I recall a named Heather there. So let's just touch base so that I can make sure I have your correct information. Yeah, so those smaller meetings, we wanted to really make sure that we reached residents. So we also reached out to Rebecca Schultz at Audubon Society and said, can you please forward this information to any residents that have had to mitigate the challenges that you've experienced? And just another thing I wanted to say, that we are very aware of those challenges and that collaborative mitigation would be necessary. We definitely don't want to, create signage for an already existing path that is going to get worse, that doesn't have any monitoring or any management. We do believe that there needs to be management.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Ellen Cadwallader, and I live at 81 Indian Brook Road, where Heather was just talking about, right there, also in that same area. My real question is there really a plan for an actual pathway as well as the road that is there planned? Or is it to be using the road that exists and sharing it?
On Indian Brook Road specifically, it would be sharing the current road. There would not be a separate facility on Indian Brook Road as a neighborhood street.
We have traffic dangers with just cars as they are, where cars and on, curves and things where there's hardly room, there's near accidents that happen. So the safety is just a real issue. Just the space. I mean, if there isn't a way to barricade off some part of an area, where it's actually safe, because people, they drive faster than they should,
We can take a closer look, I think, as we're in the early stages of this process and hearing feedback from Indian Brook residents. I think it's important. So we'll go back to committee and we'll look at it further.
Yeah, really, just safety.
Could you just
safety.
show us how Indian Brook on the preferred plan, or where does Indian Brook fall in that? Because I'm just trying to imagine how that would be part of the traffic flow if you're way down underneath of the 9D.
Yeah, right, I know what you're saying, right.
So here in the area B, you have Boscobel. You have St. Basil Academy below the screen. And this road right here is Indian Brook Road, which this dot here is the former parking area, which had many issues, as I'm aware. So this would be the current roadway. If this desired route was accepted by St. Basil Academy to use their lands, it would connect down over or under the current 90 bridge, over the old bridge, 90 bridge, down at closer to the water elevation of the stream, and then use the former Route 9 corridor alignment through St. Basil Academy lands.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, Dan, is it just useful to remind, because I think people see lines on a map when they start to think like, oh, there's a final trail proposal. Is it useful to remind people that, this stage of the process is the first round of a grant that the town got from Hudson Valley Greenways to look at alternatives, that in order to kind of do more in-depth discussion and have all of those conversations with property owners along any route that's being looked at, there has to be it boiled down to a preferred route. And so this is just still there's been no discussion about what that path could look like, what the map towards funding looks like. I mean, it's very early in the process, and it's good to I guess, remind people that, this is about beginning. I think the main point is to get public feedback and town board feedback to say, okay, this preferred route makes sense. It's worth exploring more and going into some depth about how much it might cost to build a bridgeway over the Foundry Brook. Is that realistic to get at that level of detail to have more conversation? And I think, yeah.
If you want to step up, or here you go, he's got one right there for you.
I think we understand that it's in the early stages, but when a favored route is a favored route, it's concerning, because it might be in the early stages, but before you know it, it's in the final stages. So that's why we're concerned.
I think that's a long way off,
Yeah,
but I understand.
If I was to get every resident on Indian Brook Road to oppose this, what would happen if it's the favored route, but everyone opposes it?
I can't really answer that, but at some point there would be a
Because
decision.
every resident on Indian Brook Road is not gonna go for this.
Understood.
Yeah, it's
What would be
just,
the other route?
yeah.
But it is still a road, so it is part of the town, and it's a town road. So, and I'm not saying that's, but it is a road. It's a right of way. So.
Hello.
Is a win. So it doesn't have to be, if the residents came out and opposed, we're going to listen.
Yeah.
And the town is going to make sure that we're listening, because they represent you. So, we are feeling like that we have to take small steps and perhaps see how that feels. If we picked that first phase of Cold Spring, Nelsonville Point to Boscoville, that's taking a bite size of it. And perhaps the town decides, let's see how this feels.
And just to make it very clear, we have no control over the village of Nelsonville or the village of Cold Spring. I just want to get that out there right now. So anything we get involved with is outside the two villages. So.
I mean, it could also, I mean, the first phase could be, like you said, from Downey Oil to Boscobel, and then at that phase 2 may never exist, right? I mean, you can do it in phases and then decide that's as far as we're going to go, possibly, right?
Rebecca, that's, I think, what the problem is that, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but the residents, maybe in Indian Brook, they don't feel that you're listening, because you're not, because you put up the favored route. So you can say that your committee is listening and that you're here to listen, but you're not, because you're still coming out with a favored route that our constituents are coming to us saying that this is an issue. It's an issue with cars. You can't even get 2 cars going past there the same way.
We've been addressing issues on Indian Brook Road for as long as I've been on a town board.
But what I'm saying is that
So
you say that you're here to listen, but I feel like it's...
We do hear the residents of Indian Brook Road, obviously. We were...
Yes, we do.
I think I'm speaking. We listened to the point that we shut down the parking area on Indian Brook Road. It was an ongoing issue for how long, Ruckles? How many years? A long time. So we do listen, but I think at this point, everything is an option. And I think they're listening. And if it's not Indian Brook, it may be a bike path on 9D. I don't think we're at that stage yet. I think we're still developing the stages of, and if and when it does happen, where, the route will be. So we do listen to Indian Brook, and we've responded with as much as we possibly can. But it's still a roadway. It's not a private right-of-way. It's still a town road.
And I would just quickly add that, I think we all have to kind of go into this with the belief that there is the best intentions. And so to that point, I would say that even though the Trails Committee did send a letter to every property owner on 9D, we heard at a last public meeting, some didn't get there. Even if Indian Brook wasn't addressed, so I think what would come away from this meeting is it would be great to organize a meeting of Indian Brook residents to have that discussion and go walk it together, because that's the stage it's at. And I think that's a real good faith thing, and I'm sure the Philipstown Trails Committee would want to go have that discussion with Indian Brook residents. It would be really useful. That's the point of these sorts of feedback.
I think you had asked the question, or someone asked the question about
Someone here.
Would Indian Brook Road be the pathway, or would it be a separate pathway? And the answer was it would be Indian Brook Road. So there's nothing to walk. It's Indian Brook Road. So you don't need to walk it. There's not a separate.
So I can answer that from what we have analyzed so far. The question is it a separate facility or is it using the road right away? So from our first review of the corridor, it looks like there is not a lot of right-of-way within Indian Brook. It's a very narrow right-of-way. That is the reason why we're saying using the town road as a facility. Now, there's accommodations that we can go through an easement process or approval process to have a separate facility. That is safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. We would go down that route as well. So in this first stage, looking at the mapping we have available, does not look like there's a lot of right-of-way. So that's the reason why you're seeing a favored route as being that corridor. But the facility type can be several. And I think to the supervisor's point, this is the first step of a conversation. We have not heard much, if any, Indian Brook comments to date. This is our 4th meeting. We're hearing them now. So in our process of taking that feedback in, the committee's meeting weekly to go through the comments and the stages as to how do we formulate that, how we consolidate the comments into what makes sense for the route. Does something change? Do we have to add something? What goes in the final report? What's best for the town?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not quite sure why Indian Brook has to be on the route for a great length. It seems to me if you come through the Boscobel Woodland Trail, you come out near the beginning of Indian Brook Road, you can take a left, maybe walk half a block, and resume traffic on 9D, and then possibly re-enter the St. Basil's land if you can get there right away. Because basically Indian Brook Road is pretty downhill to begin with. It's not such a tremendously accessible trail except to get to the bird sanctuary and to get to the waterfall. So, I don't understand why more than a quarter of a block of it or so would have to be utilized, since you can get pretty much over to the beginning of it, right through Boscobel's land.
That is the option. As you know, that there is a current bridge over the stream, so accommodations within the right-of-way would to make a parallel to bridge or along the bridge as well, and then get into St. Basil's Academy. So we're in alternatives analysis stage, so hearing feedback, hearing alternatives. We'll talk as a committee to see what is a feasible alternative as well to be considered, and looking at lands and where can it work. So it's a facility connection.
What they know about putting bridges over streams that will stand up to the weather, because they do it as class projects.
Thank you.
We're gonna give it about another 10 minutes till 9 o'clock, and then we're gonna wrap it up. So if we can.
My name is Tim Haskell. I live in the village, Cold Spring Village. Two things. One, on a positive note, I am Rebecca's husband. It is her birthday, so if you say happy birthday. She's mad. No, you don't have to sing. She'll be mad. She's already mad. She's already mad.
We've been a great way to spend your birthday.
And the second thing, now, as her husband, I've been to all these things mostly, and they're very politic and very diplomatic, too diplomatic to say it, but no matter what road it's on, the one thing I am certain of, that group of people would oppose it. that has something that has been very clear in all the meetings. I'm not saying that you have that's a reason to accept it. I'm just saying it is I've noticed it is very challenging for them, because no matter where they Tetris this thing, there's going to be a group of people that are like, oh, we don't like that. So it's like it's like you were saying, they're not listening. I don't believe that at all. They've rerouted this thing several times. They've created several favored routes. They've listened to people. I've watched this map change 4 or 5 times. They're listening to everybody, and that's the problem.
And it'll change 4 or 5 more
So it's
times.
like, so I do think that was an unfair characterization. But I'm just saying. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a reason for you to accept it. You can do what you want. But I've grown to appreciate how challenging this is becoming to them, because ultimately, unlike the trail that is not to be named like Voldemort, this is not. I mean, it's all about, like, people are concerned about the tourists and how many people it's going to bring. I mean, the thing about that trail is that it is being branded and marketed like a tourist attraction. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is not going to be that. I mean, I don't know what kind of wayfinding you're going to be having, or what kind of, like, arrows and signage and stuff, but, like, this is not like, come here, like, entrance to the, like, this is really it's sort of like an insider's trail. So yeah, I'm sure someone might get wind of it, someone might stumble into it, but I don't predict, unless you guys have different plans, that there's this massive press release to the New York Times about this way that you can get from my house to Boscobel. So, I just wanted to make that point.
As we As we saw with Indian Brook Falls, it doesn't take any signage. All it is one person. Right. Yes, sir.
Hi. I live on 9D between the Garrison School and the Fish Library.
Okay.
And I'm wondering what the board's opinion would be if they knew the trail went through someone's property, which it does in my case.
Well, since we don't really have the layout of the trail, I don't know how that would really exist.
Well, the right-of-way term is being thrown around here like it's a magic wand.
You mean the right-of-way of New York State Route 9D?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm sure
it
that's
varies
pretty delineated.
all over the place. So I know there's no right-of-way to where it intersects my property. My property goes right out to the pavement.
Okay.
There's no way that trail can go through, as far as I can determine.
Okay, well, that's...
So,
right. They certainly aren't going to take over your property, by no means, but I believe we're utilizing designated right-of-ways on 9D, certainly, but obviously there are private partnerships that you would be seeking in the future.
It's the gentleman's point. I think it's very similar to a comment to the last meeting where we heard is, I want to acknowledge that the right-of-way of 9D very significantly to his point, where some locations it's 30, 36 feet, and it can also vary in one location, I think it's 90, because that's where the old 9D intersected. So the width does vary significantly. If everything you've seen so far of the line that we're showing, we're intending on keeping everything within the right-of-way as much as possible, based upon the mappings available to date, GIS mapping or DOT available mapping right now. But in any process we have to go through, we have to get survey out to identify where is actually that limit. Where is the right-of-way that's the monuments of your property? And if you're on the west side between Garrison School and the Fishman Library, the intention is to stay on the east side of 9D to avoid the private lands as much as possible. So to that point, identifying right-of-way will be a critical piece in the next stages of the project to understand where is the property and is it truly within the shoulder and stays within right-of-way as much as possible, or using other institutions' lands that are granted to the project to move forward.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes. Let's make it quick because we're gonna try to wrap it up.
Yeah, my name is Greg McGarva. I live on Indian Brook Road. Supposed to chuckle. Look, I think first of all the planning that was done here and the planning for use is going very well. I think there's obviously a lot of work went into it. But when you're planning something, there's planning for use and there's planning for operation. And I think that there should be some more focus on planning for operation, which includes studies to see what kind of traffic you're going to have on it. And then if you have too much traffic, how are you going to manage it? Because I think a managed solution is much more preferable. The intent of having it for local people, fine, totally supportive. But the practical reality of it is, all it takes is one or two tweets on social media, and everybody's going to be on it. Okay, so I'd like to offer that a couple things. One, I think you're too early in your process to put the word preferred route on your options. You're really just considering options, and I think putting a preferred route, that's going to steer everybody in one direction and start to take the focus off of other options that are out there, such as going from Boscobel to the Marsh, for example, with a raised walkway, and then on to St. Basil property and down there, because that solves a whole bunch of problems. That takes everything out of the residential area, and it gives people a wonderful walk through this beautiful marsh, and then it connects with Audubon, so now you have Audubon and Boscobel connected. And Audubon's a big attractor here for both locals and out-of-towners. And if you connect that together, that makes Audubon a lot more accessible. So I think that just in the grand scheme of things, your planning is appreciated and all that sort of thing. But I would like to also suggest that in your guiding principles that you also throw the comprehensive plan in there as a guiding principle, and there it speaks to things like overburdening roadways and that sort of thing. But anyway, so being so early in the process, I think if I have an overarching comment, it's just I think you're focusing too much on one option when there are still plenty more out there. They may not be easy. None of this is easy. Obviously, you've done a lot of hard work, but there are some options that are available out there that could really make this really nice for a lot of people and make it managed, especially when you take a route from Boscobel and go out over the water to the marsh. You have the ability to channel people in there, and you could even use it as a throttle point. So thank you for listening. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a very quick point before?
Sure.
Just-
We're going to take one more question.
Just the quick point here, I think it's easy to imagine the whole vision of the route between Cold Spring and Garrison, and just to also remind us, part of the conversation and feedback from the board and people is phasing of this sort of a project. And so by that I mean, if Phase A was the preferred phase, then just beginning to focus on how to build a trail from the village of Cold Spring to Boscobel, which is Phase A, which would take a long time, also gives the community a chance to say, like, is this useful? Is this where it should end? Is it worth going further with it? And so I think we should also remember that there's a phased aspect of this project that allows us to see if the community wants more of it and to go from there. So I just wanted to point that out.
But Jason, one last thing regarding that. We didn't say this in the presentation, but we abandoned the idea of going along the marsh because it didn't align with the purpose of the trail. The purpose of the trail was for residents to get to some of the places they need to go without a vehicle.
And I think the
But-
more scenic we make it, the more tourism you're going to get, without a doubt. The more scenic it is, you go along the river, you're going to have
The
crowds.
last thing was also,
What's
we
that? Got it. Go ahead,
did
sir.
get feedback from Audubon Society, regarding nesting birds, habitat, and we want a very light footprint.
Yes, sir.
Great. So my name is Jeff Michelson. I live in Cold Spring. I am a member of the committee, but I'm certainly not the most active member, so in a way I'm speaking more as a community member. And, I think this has been a great discussion, and while we, talk about the possible routes, which have changed a lot, will change a lot, this input is incredibly valuable to that process. I do want to just refocus, maybe as a last word tonight, on the need for this, and speaking specifically to this first phase of the project, roughly from Cold Spring to Boscobel. Someone said earlier tonight that there is currently a safe footpath that connects Cold Spring to Boscobel. Specifically, I think someone said from Foodtown. Now, I've walked that route many times. I've biked that route many times, and I have to be honest. A year ago, when I found out my first child was on his way, I stopped doing it because the risk equation changed in my mind. It wasn't worth risking my life to do that. There is no safe route between those two locations, on foot, on bike, by any means. So, we really need to keep focused on the need for this, which I think probably the majority, if not everyone in this room, recognizes, and build on that toward a process that satisfies, if not everyone, as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Only because I really like you, you can be the last
Thank you.
one.
I'll be that one more. I see a lot of listening going on, and I want you to know there's a lot of representatives here that are listening to, and I see this committee who I've been talking to for years. I'm Nancy Montgomery. I'm the county legislator and was involved way back, in the Route 9D corridor study. And it's been a long time. This is the most patient committee I've ever seen. And the conversations you've had, and I see a lot of community stakeholders here too, like Boscobel and other groups. And I just left the village meeting where they were discussing parking, and I know I passed North Highlands, and there's something going on there, and there's something going on in the library. And in every corner of this town tonight, there's pockets of people like us gathered talking about how to make this community better. So thank you to the Philipstown Trails Committee. Thank you, Weston Sampson, for your really great presentation. I know this is the beginning phase, and we have a long, long way to go, and we have a lot more listening to do. I learned a lot tonight, but I am so grateful as I drive around this community that I know in every pocket of this community there are groups of people that are just trying to make the community better and safer. And they're volunteers, and thank you so much.
Thank you. This gentleman's been patiently standing for a long time, and we could take one more question, and that is it. We're out of here.
My name is Delmar Carlin. I live in Garrison, off Route 9D, a short ways off. But I've attended some of these meetings, and unfortunately, I was one of the people who never got the notice of the group meeting, and there were quite a few people who didn't in our area as well as in Indian Brook. But I've looked into it some, and as somebody said at the Trails meeting last night, and this is really for the board, looking into the nuts and bolts very carefully is very important. There's the maintenance issue. We talked about safety. There are standards that the state has set, that AASHTO, others have set for safety, that are very critical to look at when you're doing something like this, and they don't make it easy. And significantly, the right-of-way question is critical. I've looked into the right-of-way, apparently more than Weston Sampson has. And there are quite a few places along 9D where there's the right-of-way is essentially the road. There's no place to add anything, unless you start to take private property, which everybody says you don't want to do. No. So those will constrain the options, and I think it's a very critical thing for Route 9D and perhaps for other areas too, as to whether or not it even can be done unless you're changing everything. So I just wanted to encourage you to look very, very carefully and closely at the details, at the nuts and bolts. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you to the Trails Committee.